FourNet globally, we work in sort of four main sectors. So we've got unified comms, networking, security. And we've got the bit that I work in, which is solely different. It comes from that, selecting C-gas, so effectively selling things like that. Globally managed all those platforms. We have to supply maintain, which is a big private cloud, and then put a lot of the sector music. So from we kind of work on the fact that how our products and tend to promote two types of products. And that's what makes it so kind of working all the different areas that you'll find it in. So we've got things from low cost optimization, insight analytics, AI automation, all the sorts of bits and pieces. And we've got more of the hardline teach infrastructure and things like that. So what we're really here to talk about today is CXP and how we drive efficiency through contact centres. So what we generally really approach a project, the transformation of things that requirements, is we kind of run everything sort of in this pyramid. So everything for us starts at the top with planning, workforce optimisation. So making sure that everything that you've currently got is optimised, and then as you work down the list, it's much harder to deliver with less connectivity. So start at the top and working it down, right down to the end where it's like doing their contacts. So the bit today, I'll be is the planning and speed building. And this is predominantly what we did at this client. It all started in our top boxes, it's things like an operating model and basis on what it is there. So then next step is then to look down and think down. Okay, so the main thing is obviously this is the they sit on our antenna platform, and what they did was they had a particular service that was struggling with entire delivery. So they had massive email backlogs, they were failing their service levels in telephony, and they really came to us to say, you know, is there any way that we can optimise what we're doing to get ourselves sort of out of the hole that we're in at the moment. So what we do with our clients is we kind of offer a free diagnostic, which is where we go in, sort of spend half a day in a workshop to really understand the business that they're in. So things like call volumes, numbers of service lines, contact types, all those bits and pieces that make the contact centre work, we spend that time up front to work out exactly how everything's put together, and therefore we can work out the most optimum way to go through that and then actually try and solve the problem that they had. So as part of that, what we do is we generally get sort of a data request off the back of it to have a look, see if we can understand what's actually happening in the contact centre. So this is essentially what we found out the back of diagnostic. So contact centre gets just over 5,000 calls a week. In there, we're getting about the same amount of emails, but one of their main issues is they were running a 13,000 email backlog, and they were adding to that every week in there. So what we did is we looked at some of the relationships between the volumes and looked at how we can, if we can see any patterns between and relationships between the volumes that are coming in and what they've got in the backlog. So essentially, with a set of analysis on the call volumes, 20% of the calls were repeats, ultimately got answered. So they'd try 2 or 3 times and then eventually get through to somebody. 30% of the calls, about 1,500 a week, didn't get answered at all, and therefore a large proportion of those people then email instead, because they can't get through on the phone, which is what you see in every contact centre. And then the other bit was, obviously, only 50% of the calls were handled, so therefore only 50% of the customers got answered in their channel of choice from that. With an email, is a little bit different. So out of the 5,000 or so emails they're getting every week, just short of 10% repeat. So they came from the same email address with the same subject header in there. So there was at least 10, sort of 9.9% in here for those emails that were just avoidable because they're out of service line. Up to 1,500 emails per week were potentially driven off the back that they'd not answered the phone. So they ended up in this loop cycle of, I don't answer the phone because I'm doing the emails, but then I don't get to all the emails because I'm trying to answer the phone, and by the time you finish, you end up vanishing at your own exhaust. And there was also currently unquantifiable number of calls that were driven by people chasing emails because they were so far out of service on the email. So you just end up, as I said, in this massive cycle, spinning your way through, trying to figure out what to do and how to fix it. So, what did we work out that where we wanted to get to? So what we want you to do is, we want you to make sure that you could answer the calls as and when they were delivered. So the 20% spin rate, we wanted to get rid of that completely, which had obviously dropped the offered volume down to about 4,000 a week from 5,000. 25 to 30% of calls that didn't get answered at all and didn't go anywhere, we wanted to make sure we answered those in the channel of choice to the customer. And that way, that would then feed into the email bit. So if we can remove the fairly demanding email by getting rid of the backlog, we can drop their demand. And also, if we answer the calls in the customer's channel of choice, that also drops email demand. And once you get on top of your email, obviously then you get less people trying to phone to chase up the calls. So what did we do? There we go. So what we did was we effectively split what we call the optimization stage down into two phases. First phase, stage one, was to get back to basics in the email and admin management. First thing we did with that one was sort of enhance all the functionality of reporting. So they have an existing reporting suite, Power BI driven, but what they were missing was some key measures on measuring productivity. They couldn't count back office data and all those sorts of bits and pieces, so we put some things in place that enabled them within their existing platforms to see and manage all the volumes that they could. What we then did is, once we put all these new measures in place, coached all the team leaders and ops team how to use them effectively. Because having all this data and all this MI is great, but if you don't know what to do with it, then you might as well not have it. So we went through that phase of literally sitting with the team leaders and the coaches and saying, like, if this measure goes to this, then you need to have this conversation, etc., etc. So we went literally down to that level of detail in stage one. Next one, we instituted what we call a priority matrix and a fire break to fix the email issue. So essentially what the fire break does is it tries to stop spin by, if your service levels, for instance, on email 5 days, if you clear everything out of day 5 and keep on top of anything coming in, then you shouldn't get any repeat contact for that volume. So you manage that volume and separate your backlog. We did that for it. Last one was to really focus on real-time management and clearance rates. So because it's public sector, they have a big focus on individual productivity, so trying to make sure that, at an individual level, everybody's being productive. Whereas what that can do is you end up in this realm of not being able to say look for the trees because they didn't look at the centre productivity and think that actually if they've got a lot of people who are underperforming, but they've got a lot that are overperforming, in the end they'll end up at the right level. They just concentrated always on this poor individual performance, and that was dragging down overall productivity. So we refocused that and got them to look at it at productivity as an overarching element and look at it in real-time clearance rates rather than getting on whether somebody was in the right place at the right time for back office. That was stage one. Stage two was about killing the spinning telephony. Now, the reason that we actually did it this way around is because they have quite a lot. They had a massive email backlog, but they also have a number of admin functions in there. So actually, the telephony bit's only about a third of the volume. So what we wanted to do initially to make sure we had enough resource to break the spin cycle is to fix the back office essentially, leave the telephony bit alone, and then use the excess resource that we'd made available in the back office to pump into the front office to break the cycle of the spin in there. And that's why we kind of did them that way around rather than trying to do telephony first, which is where a lot of people aim for. So the first things we did within telephony is we recalculated their service levels. So this particular client had an aspiration to answer their calls with an average speed of answer of 15 minutes, which for them was good. As you'll see later what they were actually at. So what we did was, we knew that would drive spin anyway, because 15 minutes is too long. Nobody's going to wait an average of 15 minutes. That means people are waiting an hour or 2 hours in some cases. So we recalculated what the actual customer propensity to abandon was and set the target accurately. Now, initial target to kill the spin, we set at 20 seconds. But actually what we did was, once we'd broken that spin, we then dialed it back. And actually the sweet spot for these guys is about 2 minutes to maintain sort of about a 5% abandon rate. Next thing we did was ensuring that priority was a priority service for telephony. So what they did historically was, one of the reasons they got into this state is because they focus on, because email work comes in and stays in, they concentrate just on trying to clear emails without managing productivity, and left telephony to just do what it was doing and put the minimum amount of resource on. What actually happens, obviously, that is you're just driving more volume in. So by reprioritising telephony and articulating to the client that by fixing the telephony, you'll actually end up cutting your volumes in email as well, we got them to refocus their resource on that. Next thing we did was adjusted the schedules to better align to the staff demand profile. So because they were a client that had lots of different tasks, they literally used to schedule people out down to an hour block. So what you'd find is somebody do an hour on telephony, then an hour on email, then an hour on admin, then they do another hour on admin, then do another hour on telephony. Not only does that make scheduling a nightmare, but what it also does is it means that the agents never got into a rhythm of doing a particular task because they were always getting broken off to do something else. So we effectively broke that down and went, right, well, instead of giving them hour blocks, let's make sure everybody's got at least a half-day block. And actually, because the opening hours are limited because of the surveys, that works quite nicely because actually the opening hours are almost just one shift. So therefore, we just go morning phones, afternoon admin, and flip it between the agents. You get a much better return out of productivity and things like that because they get into that groove of doing it. And again, sort of a theme that's gone through sort of all the way is this, focusing on real-time management. So the key bits, again, that passed over from back office is when you get into this situation where it is always on fire. So, it's literally service levels are always failing, you've always got backlogs, you're just growing. Everybody becomes immune to it over time. And they kind of built this problem up over sort of 10, 11 months. So they lost that focus on real time because they were too busy trying to think about what the queue was going to look like today, tomorrow, next week. And therefore lost that energy that you should have in a contact centre environment to keep everything going and keep everybody doing what you need them to do. So we've got to really focus down onto that one. So the outcome of all this is, specifically in telephony, first contact answer rate. Now, first contact answer rate is the number of customers that got answered first time, that tried to call, and then didn't call back within a 7-day period. It's only at 26%, so not brilliant. Abandonment rate was even worse, so they're abandoning 55% of the calls. So, and this is when they were aiming for a 15-minute average speed of answer. They're actually running at a 46-minute speed of answer-ish. So they were abandoning 55% of the calls. And productivity, when we baselined it, was running at 56%. So agents, against their own targets, were only being productive 56% of the time. And most of that productivity gap is down to the fact that they didn't have the visibility in, not even in real time, in near time of what the actual productivity was. So therefore, by enabling that, we were able to make some changes to it. So, where did they go? So by the time we'd finished with them in telephony, the first contact answer rate got up to 88%. So not only were customers getting answered first time, they were then not having to call back. Abandonment rate went from 55% to 1.5%. So they literally dropped all their abandoned calls. And it's like I said, how we did that was by re-baselining the average speed of answer and making sure that they then staffed to that, got that down. Now they've eased off that a bit. So when we did the baseline afterwards, it's down at 1.5. They currently run about 3%. So they are still under that 5% magic number. And their average speed of answer is aligned accordingly. When we measured the productivity, after putting in all the measurement capability for them, they'd increased it to 87% productivity. So that's effectively 87% occupancy for them. Which is, they were aiming for between 85 and 90% is down to their baseline. We got up to 87. So these are the outcomes effectively for the citizens. So this is what people that were using this service were feeling. So as I said, average speed of answer, 2,760 seconds or 46 minutes. So in that, people were waiting 3 hours sometimes to get through. And because this is a public sector service, a central government service, there is no option to go anywhere else. If you want your query answered, you're going to have to hang on. Response times for emails were an average 21 days across the period before we went live. So we took kind of a 6 months average before we went in. And then the processing time for back office tasks, so all the other processing tasks that they have to do within the contact centre, had moved to 10 days. Where we ended up, so average speed of answer, we got that 47 seconds. So our initial target was 20, we didn't quite get there, we got 47, but because it delivered the abandoned rate, it done badly, it's kind of, that was the aim really. They're currently running at about 2 minutes to get through, which delivers that about 3% abandoned rate for all of them. Response times for emails are between 3 and 5 days. So 21 days average previously, with some emails sat in that queue for 40, 45 days. Now they've literally got nothing under 5 days in that queue. And a lot of the time they run it down to 3 to make sure that they can move down people between tasks. They know in advance now to run their email queue down to enable that. Processing time for all the back office tasks reduced from 10 days on average down to a 5-day. And there wasn't really anything that we did about that. It's just specifically the focus on productivity. Because the processing time for back office tasks was a self-imposed target. But we just managed to cut that in half just by getting them to focus on everything else. And it just naturally fell in line for them. We also had some other impacts such as, AHT reduced. So their AHT came down from about 15 minutes to 12 minutes, which again helps all these things line up in there. But again, we didn't do anything with AHT, so it's a natural byproduct of getting the staff more engaged because the contact centre is not currently on fire, as it were. So what does that mean overall for them? So what we do, so and if you kind of remember back to the pyramid, the idea of doing the optimisation work up front for this particular customer was to get them into the realms of being ready for transformation. Because the way that we do it, you know, resource planning and workforce optimization is kind of the first step on the transformation path. Because if you haven't got an optimized contact centre and you drop a lot of tech in, it's great, but if you've got gaps in your productivity already, all the tech's going to do is kind of cover the gap, but that doesn't deliver a benefit to the business because you're just patching what's already broken. So part of what we do is do the workforce optimization bit first to make sure that there aren't any gaps in your contact centre, and therefore when you do drop technology and transformation projects on top, what that actually does is deliver the real benefit that the supplier tells you he's going to deliver in there. So things that the client are currently looking at. So process automation. So taking some of those back office tasks and, you know, simple things, and I say simple, not even that, you know, some might even that simple anymore. Taking those and putting a platform in that will automate some of those tasks. So therefore free up more resource to deal with front-end customer queries rather than processing things in the back office. Interaction analytics. So real-time speech, auto summary, all those sorts of bits and pieces that you get off that side of it, plus the analytic on the back of it that says why people are calling, what are the pain points, what do I need to change in the business to actually make those calls go away. Sets you up for that. And then lastly, agent assist. So things, you know, platforms that will effectively in real time coach the agent on what to tell the customer, or what is the, or, you know, have you done all your DPA checks and all those sorts of bits and pieces. So we supply technologies that do all these things, and that agent assistance is kind of a key one for a lot of our clients, and especially this one, just on the basis that, you know, a lot of the things that they deal with are sensitive, and therefore they need to make sure that the agent's doing everything that they should be doing. Okie doke. So, any questions from anybody?